Welcome to season 19 of the Productized Podcast. My name is André Marquet. I'll be your host for today's episode. This season, we're all about creating change together with Productized 2025, where we explore how product leaders, innovators, and change makers can drive real, lasting, impactful, and actionable, being actionable across industries, across communities. And today's guest is actually someone that is coming to speak at Productized 2025. She's a speaker, and she brings a truly global lens to product thinking. Chui Chui Tan is a cross-cultural strategist. She's also the author of Research for Global Growth, and she's the founder of Beyō Global, where she helps business grow internationally by turning deep cultural understanding into clear strategic action. With a background in human behavior, UX, and cultural systems, she's worked with brands across continents to ensure that products are not only globally scalable, but also locally meaningful. Whether it's guiding teams through international expansion or challenging the assumptions we make about universal design, Chui Chui is a true change maker at the intersection of culture and product. Chui Chui, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Sorry, go ahead. Thank you.
Usually we start this by doing, some icebreakers.
Yeah.
Good. We started talking even before the podcast a little bit, but do you have any product or service that you can't live without? And we were just talking how much of a globetrotter you are, traveling to Asia and also South America. Anything that helps you on those journeys, maybe?
Maybe one of the apps that I actually have been using quite a lot, even actually when I'm traveling, is an app called Insight Timer. I don't know if you heard about it before.
No.
So it's a meditations and mindfulness app. So it has courses and guides and music. Yeah, so it's very useful for me because I use it every day. And I actually was in Colombia 2 months ago, and I actually flew from Malaysia. I think we were talking about that. So it was a long journey, and the time difference was 13 hours. So it's almost like daytime and nighttime completely reversed. So I thought I was going to have the problem in going to sleep and also, all the jet lag and everything. But I was using this app. It was amazing because in the middle of night, I got up because it's the morning time in Malaysia.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, this app helped me to fall asleep back again. So actually have a good routine. And then when I went back to Malaysia again, I used that again. And it seems I have no jet lag issues at all. But that is just one of the things that I found super useful when I travel. But in the normal life, I have been using it as well.
And how does it help getting back to sleep?
There are a lot of options. There's so many of them, right? There are so many trainers and so many different types of meditation guide or mindfulness guide and so on. So I found one that actually works for me in terms of how it relaxes your body, and because sometimes you get up not because of jet lag as well, because your brain starts to think about a lot of things, and then you start to get even more alert and more awake. The apps, some of the guides actually help you to relax back and be more mindful of your body and everything and doze off. So it depends on which one you choose. Some of them is for napping. I'm not a good napper because my brain is always but then there are a lot of scientific papers saying that sometimes it's actually good to nap 20 minutes. And this app actually have a lot of napping, 20 minutes nap. It's a bit like, I don't think they say it as a hypnotherapy, kind of hypnosis sessions, but I had hypnotherapy sessions before. Sometimes it's kind of in that moment where you're kind of floating. I don't know. Have you had hypnotherapy before or hypnosis?
No, I haven't. No.
So it's kind of like you're in the stage where you almost fall asleep, but you're not. You're still alert. You're still hearing something, and sometimes your body will jump because your body's muscles thought you are kind of not moving. They're trying to get you up. So that is how I feel it when I had a proper hypnotherapy sessions. So sometimes the apps do that as well in some way that you are trying to meditate or be mindful, and then you kind of go into the beta phase. You're kind of awake and not awake, but I don't think they are allowed to. Maybe they are allowed to say this is there's a hypnotherapy elements in it, because I think that you need qualifications or certifications or whatever like that.
And
So I think there's a cross between meditation, mindfulness, and hypnotherapy kind of thing.
And how comfortable was it to get this routine change in your life and embrace it? Like using the app, using meditation. Was this hard to do? Because lots of people that start meditation or start this practice, they gave up after a few tryouts, right? I mean, they try out. That's why the churn of these apps is so high. So people just give up on it.
Same here. So for many years, I was using an app called Headspace when they just first started. So Andy, I can't remember Andy something, the founder. And so I was using that, and actually I had a good routine. I do that every morning, but it's hard sometimes when the weather is so cold and winter in the UK, and it's really hard to get up as well to kind of find time. But I managed to kind of have a routine. But when I start traveling, all gone again. And I actually didn't get back to meditations for 2 or 3 years after that, because it's so hard to get back. And every year, end of the year, that New Year resolutions kind of thing. I don't tend to do that, but I always think like I want to start meditations again every morning. It didn't happen for a few years as well. So yeah, I get it. I get what you say about having the routine, but I think the one that I found now is it's not really meditations, but it's more about scanning bodies. I actually doing it recommended you to do it while you're lying down. So that kind of helped, because I'm kind of about to get up, not get up yet. Instead of checking my phones or anything else like email or messages or anything, I will actually have that. So sometimes I did doze off and come back again, and I kind of feel like it's fine. Sometimes I have the whole body scanning, and so I start to see a bit different because I don't force myself to do that as I have to. And I start to see, I actually pick it up more now, doing it quite easily in the morning than I used to, saying, oh, I might skip this, I might skip that.
So you prefer doing it early morning before having coffee or tea or whatever?
Yeah, before I even get out from the bed. I sometimes sit on the bed
So talking about...
By the way, I'm not recommended my option is good, because I heard a lot of meditations guru or trainers or saying like you should have a space not confusing with your bed, because bed is where you sleep. But I think the whole thing is finding what works for you, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's probably better doing it in bed than not doing it at all, right? So I don't know what you're drinking, maybe just water, but are you a coffee or a tea person, and what works best for you on big changes?
I am tea person. I don't drink coffee at all. I want to say I never drink coffee ever in my life, but it's not true, because sometimes I accidentally given coffee, or you go to, I drink chai latte a lot if I go to cafes or anything like that. And sometimes they also have some coffee elements in it, and I couldn't drink them. And sometimes the coffee is too strong. It's funny, my family all coffee lovers, and they just like, you miss so much by not drinking coffee. You kind of like, but because there are a lot of nice things about coffee, I get it. But sometimes the smell's too strong. I remember when I was doing my PhD in the room, we have no window, and someone bring a coffee in, I think an instant coffee, and the smell is so strong. I actually feel dizzy, and I just can't do it. But I found that actually I really like the smell of Colombian coffee. Actually, the client actually bought it for me when I was there in Colombia as a gift. I just like, this coffee smells really nice. I actually put it in my hand luggage because it smells nice. So that was the first time I felt coffee smell is good for my sense rather than feeling too overwhelmed. So I'm a tea person.
And all right, so maybe just to on the get this going before we actually dive into the actual questions of the more deeper discussion on product. But what is a product you think is doing things right when it comes to cultural adoption and adaptation?
products that doing right.
Product, app,
or
service,
business
something or
service.
business. Yeah, something you really say, okay, these guys are actually doing a good job. I really like the way they are approaching this, how they're studying it, and how they are delivering value across different cultures in this case.
Yeah. I can, so I work with Spotify a lot. So I have been their long-term partner for 7 years now across 50 countries, I think more than that. So different teams and everything. So I know how much they kind of look into the local culture and local elements within it and embed it in all aspects of their business. So that I know firsthand, and they're doing very good on that. And then I know also IKEA. For example, one typical example they did very, very well as a case studies is when they're in India. So they did very well. They actually spent a lot of time because India is not a very easy market to get into because there's so many different variables and cultural aspects that you need to look after. I think they visited 1,000 houses, homes across India before they kind of define how they should operate in a different ways. So there are a few countries. And then Netflix, I know as well, there are actually a lot of elements. I worked with them for a few projects before. They also look into the cultural elements where it fits. But even things that we know, they have a lot of localized content, isn't it? And then how it fits into that. So that is just a content part. But I know they're actually doing a lot across different aspects of the business as well.
I'm so surprised about IKEA because, I didn't know about the story in India. I've heard they had a lot of issues when they tried to get into Japan. On the first try back, 20 years or 30 years ago, they ended up actually trying to change the entire strategy. And I'm also surprised because IKEA, out of all companies, is a company that you immediately recognize where it's coming from. They really are very Scandinavian. They actually put, Swedish food on their own supermarkets, and it's a very Swedish Scandinavian centric approach. So the fact that they were able to be successful in India is really a very interesting business strategy.
I would say
inspired, educational,
overwhelming, very practical,
challenging,
thought-provoking,
meaningful,
enthusiastic,
nice people,
innovation, and fun.
Product growth mindset.
new connections.
Join us at the coolest product management environment this October in Lisbon.
And my question is really, what does it really mean to understand culture in product work?
It's good questions because one of the things that we always hear people say, oh, we need to adapt our products into local culture, right? And I always step back and ask them, like, what do we mean by culture? Because it's so easy to use this word. But is that means like culture in terms of how people use your products in a certain way, or is that because of the language means culture, their language, or how does that mean in that instance? How I myself interpret culture is that it is multi-layered. So it's about the language, of course, but it's also about the clothes we wear, the food we eat, and the building that we build, the non-verbal language that we use. In some culture, we use a lot, all these are culture. So it's everything that we breathe in, and it's huge. In that instance, that means culture is continuously evolving, right? So it's not like when you build a product, say, oh, we need to understand the market. We kind of dig deep into their culture, and then we kind of adapt whatever findings we found in our products, and that is it. It's not like that because it's actually, there are so many layers. You might uncover one layer, and you might actually have a roadmap or products that cover that layer, but you need to continue to look into that. And also sometimes culture will evolve as well because of the environment, because of the technology infrastructure change in that country. So there are people's behavior and people's mentality start changing as well. So your products and business need to kind of follow that route as well, so that you kind of keep updated as well. So that is kind of two layers that on products you need to look into that, because it's continue evolving and it's actually quite wide. And the good thing is, like, could be quite overwhelming for product managers or whatever. Say like, how do we even start? Where do we even stop? But the thing is, you don't have to trying to fix everything, trying to understand. Say, I need to know everything about this culture so that I can create one product that is really good. You can start from the very basic and then start evolving from there as well.
And why do you think the build first, localize later approach is still so common? And is there a better alternative?
You mean like a lot of company trying to build something and then say, oh, then we launch it in the market. And then we adapt it.
Sometimes they even launch in the market, but they don't, they're not localizing it. Maybe they're expecting to grow to a certain point before they actually put the effort to localize. Or exactly what you're saying, which is, well, we'll localize later. And sometimes that localization is very much a first order localization. It's just translating. And even translating is, sometimes comes with lots of grammar mistakes because it's done very poorly or done by, AI or amateurs, right? So this still seems to be very much the common track for most products. Localization is an afterthought. Culturalization is an afterthought. Is there a better alternative? What's your stance on it?
Yeah, there are so many layers in your questions there. So I think you use the word localization and culturalization. So I just want to kind of clarify that as well. Like localizations, as we all know, people know what that is because it's a common term. For me, I use culturalizations because localizations often being misinterpreted as just translating the language. It's language related, and maybe change one or two things like the currency, and then that is it, right?
Right, exactly.
So for me, I use culturalization because culture is huge, like we talk about, and culturalization means a wider and more holistic local adaptations into your products and services into the local context and local culture and so on. So that's why I use the word culturalization. And in terms of, you say a lot of companies now only they might either just translate the language and then translate it wrongly or not in context, or just change this and that and then kind of launch it and let it grow, or they just launch it as it is with a local language and then adapt it later on as well. And you're right, it's very common and it's only quite a few companies that doing it more in the right way. Like we talked about some examples earlier on as well, Spotify, IKEA, Netflix and so on. So for me, I kind of see this as we are going through different phases of local adaptations, evolutions, really. So if we think about it as maybe pre-internet and 20th centuries, so company normally will be just taking their product and services and launch and change, not even change the language at that point, and just to kind of launch it and with English interface, for example, or fast food chain might be kind of offering the same menu in every country.
Exactly.
And that was fine then because it's a pre-internet, everything is still, we are not in a globalization stage yet at that point. So that kind of works. And then we start to move into from the one size fit all mentality to more sophisticated stages. So companies start to localize more on translation. So they know, oh, okay, now we need to change language. And some might actually even have currency changes that we talk about, or date or time formatting and so on. And some is believe this is important. And that I would say is like during 20th centuries and 2000s and early 2010s in that period. And a lot of companies that I've seen actually start to understand and aware that this kind of surface level culturalizations is not enough anymore. So they will kind of have these advanced functional localizations. So this is where from to now early 20s, or some companies still doing that. It's more that they switch more localization, thinking about infrastructure, for example, or the method in China is Alipay, in Brazil used to be installment, and then now it's Pix.
Exactly. Funny thing, they just launched Pix here in Portugal as well, because there's so many Brazilians that some stores are actually launching Pix here so that, Brazilians can keep using Pix.
So how is it getting on now in Pay? Is that still new or
It's
is
quite new.
locals doing?
It's quite new.
Okay. It'll be good. It'll be interesting to see how that being picked up, moving. Obviously, there's obvious reasons that they choose Portugal
Mhm.
to launch it and see how it works. But yeah, would be. What do you think?
I think it will work because Pix, when Pix is actually quite recent. Pix was launched maybe in 3-4 years ago. It's not like it has been around for many years. Oh, but it's like it's an amazing success. It's a overwhelming success. It went from 0 to hundreds of millions of people using it in basically 2 or 3 years, which is by any standard one of the highest growing digital fintech products ever in the world. And Brazil has an issue, which is because it's such a big country, 250 million people, all speaking the same language, all within the same culture, there's very little incentive for Brazilian companies to grow internationally. So most of these service companies, they end up staying in Brazil, and it's fine because, when you have 250 million market, it's probably just fine. So expanding outside of Brazil, it's quite uncommon for these companies with services that are actually born in Brazil. So I'm very curious, like you said, I think Portugal is kind of an obvious expansion, but expanding outside of your comfort territory is super hard for a payment system. There are very little cases of payment systems that have been able to be successful outside of their home countries.
Yeah.
I mean, you probably have like a few things like PayPal, but even in US payment systems, there have been very little instances of success for very complex reasons, which deal with the fact that the banking systems are heavily regulated and so on and so forth.
Trust and
Trusts and trust for sure. Alipay and payment systems in Asia, if I understand right. I mean, at least one was China, obviously very big there. I don't know about other Asian countries. Do you know anything about Alipay being used outside of China?
Yeah, there's some Southeast Asia countries are using it, but not as a main one.
Exactly.
I think
because everyone tends to develop their own payment system.
Exactly.
Right?
Like, for example, you were talking about a lot of financial services or payment services. It's really hard to get into outside their home countries. Like, for example, an example I always talk about is M-Pesa in Kenya.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's huge, right? And it's great. But then at the same time, they're trying to kind of replicate it into other African countries.
Yeah.
It wasn't as successful.
Yeah.
But that's because everything that works with the M-Pesa in Kenya is because it fits into their ecosystem. It fits into the mentality. Safaricom who actually created M-Pesa, was the dominant telecommunication provider.
And partnership with Huawei. I didn't know that until, very recent when I'm reading the book House of Huawei.
Yeah.
But apparently the entire infrastructure of M-Pesa was developed by Safaricom with huge help by Huawei engineers that actually set up the whole stack to allow for the interchange on top of the telecommunications network.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
But I think back to where we were talking about the different evolutions of culturalizations or localization. So we have in the stage 3 where people have advanced functional localizations where, more modern things like just dates or language or currency, but there's regulatory compliances like GDPR in Europe and data localization law, or think about social media like in Japan you have Line and more like WeChat in Brazil.
Why do you think that product teams are still holding back from building with culture in mind from the start? Is there? I just want to hear from.
But I think it's because the part of it is because of the culture of the organization. So this is what I see working with companies from different domain and different sizes as well. I think it's company culture, especially the top senior stakeholders and how they think about that, right? So I was working for an audiobook company as well and talking with the teams in Middle East once a few years ago. The main parents company, the audiobook company is in Sweden, right? So, and the stakeholder can say, oh, we actually successful launch in this way using Facebook engagement, everything in this market. We can just do the same in Middle Eastern region market as well. So I think there's a kind of misconceptions of the leader in organizations on how they set the culture as well. So that's one that could be influencing how products managers or product teams think about localization. And they have to get buy-in, to do more research. They have to get buy-in to say, we need to learn first before we launch, rather than roadmap, create something, launch something, build something, and do it quick and everything. So the product team needs to know how to get the buy-in, how to show the value, how to show that there's a knowledge gap, and showcase what is the risk that is going to, like if we kind of launch it just like that, what are the risks? One of the things I heard in a lot of boards, meetings and things like that, people talk about operations risks about launching. They talk about all these regulatory risks and everything, but they don't talk about cultural risks. Cultural risk is very important.
That's so true. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of something that it needs to be embedded in the organization. But I think products managers or product teams actually play a really, really important role to bring people together as well, like different teams to kind of understand why is it important. They can start from small, right? Depending on the team setup as well. They can start from, we have a few local designer or local teams in these countries or this market. Can we actually work together to kind of find out about the different knowledge and to showcase what is the differences between all these markets to the board so that they buy into it more? Or they could put actually case studies of how companies does wrongly, and then actually the ROI or the losses they actually encounter if they don't do it rightly, and then what is to show the impact as well. So there are a lot of things that product managers could do to kind of help them on that.
Can you maybe walk us through a real world example, maybe from your consulting practice or just out of literature, where culture insight directly shaped the product success?
Yes. All the projects we did actually have that. So let's take Spotify example, because I work with them a lot. And so a lot of times, for example, we wanted to understand a market in terms of how do we grow that market further. So take Colombia example, because it's growing well in Latin America, but actually could go better. But what is the things that actually culturally relevant to that market that Spotify actually didn't know of? To kind of want to motivate them to use the products and also have higher engagement and then to subscribe as well. What are the things that is important in terms of culture? Because it's very easy to say, oh, because it's economy, people just don't pay much, or people just don't see the needs, because there are a lot of free versions out there, like YouTube is a big one, and SoundCloud, you have free versions as well. And so they don't need to pay more. But what are the cultural elements on that? One hypothesis went in was mobile data is very expensive in the market. So people wanted to be able to download music so they don't have to use their mobile data when they listen to music. So the download options and play offline options the features could be quite enticing for people who want to subscribe. But yet people not subscribing. And the marketing team could actually do campaigns about offline listening. You can offline listen, you don't have to use data and so on. So they could just go ahead within that. But when we went into looking into more deeper into the cultural elements, there's things that actually entice them to pay. It wasn't the offline listening. In fact, everyone have unlimited mobile data, or it was so affordable that they actually don't need that. So people don't download at all. It's not things. Whereas other things are other elements about engagement, about closeness with artists, and then the local artists communications, and those are important because it's a culture where they have the pride within their own identity and within their culture identity as well. So with that, Spotify actually able to find other ways. I can't tell you what they're going to do, but we actually identify some strategies that we can reflect to that cultural insights that we found to actually make people more connected and more wanted to see the value of connecting with Spotify and paying for Spotify more and so on.
Yeah. Yeah. No, go on.
So in that instance, it's very clear. The benefits was, if we didn't do the research, we didn't understand the cultural elements, it's very easy to make a very high level conclusions about what might work. They are going to have a campaign in a few months, for example, and the campaign could easily focus on the wrong thing and not getting the ROI they needed. Whereas now we have very, very clear strategy in terms of how they can actually build that market and find the main things that actually make that market tick as well.
Yeah, quite interestingly as well, here in Portugal, also similar markets. In this case, the online streaming, TV streaming, or better said, video on demand streaming, Netflix. They changed their pricing strategy a little bit last year, and suddenly they stopped allowing people to share their account. I mean, there was like this thing, which is you can share your account to one extra person or something. And that was a really, really bad move in the local market, because people are very used to share their account with maybe friends or family, and everyone is doing that legally. And the moment that they stop allowing people to do that, there was a huge clash on social media, a huge clash everywhere. People saying, I'm going to sign off, I'm going to cancel my subscription. So I think they eventually backtracked a little bit and allowed for that to happen, just because I don't think they understood like this culture of sharing that was ingrained in people's lives. And what are the stages of cultural adaptation you've seen evolve in the industry? Where are we now? Because we've been, like I said, from translation to personalization to full strategic adaptation. What's the trajectory, and what is the level of maturity? Do you think companies are getting more mature at this cultural aspect of adaptation? Do you think we still have a huge road to do?
Certainly, I can see some more. We are moving towards a more holistic view of what culturalization or localization is, but still a lot to catch up, right? And also different companies actually still have, some companies are still doing the translation, and that's enough. Still trying to understand and raise the awareness of that. I think because nowadays, even you say, I'm not launching in any market, I'm in my home market, even that, you can't stop people from other countries using your products, because everything is especially a lot of them are digital. People might find it, or people who actually live in the home countries that you actually have to market it might be from other countries that have their own culture within that new market. So some company, I still have to convince them or show them like why you need to do more than you are doing now. I do have exercises to show them, sometimes workshops and things like that, to kind of get them to understand the knowledge that you actually have and the missing knowledge gaps you actually need to find out before you can make any decisions on your products or your business and so on. So I think we're on the trajectory of getting more and more understand and also have a better view on where we should be. So we talked about earlier, like we saw on stage 3, and then there's a stage 4 where I'm seeing a lot more companies are doing it, mainly big companies, because they have the resources and they have the capacity to do that as better, in encompassing more views of what culturalization can impact the business as well. So, and all those are actually more psychologically or cultural related adaptations as well. So a deeper cultural adaptations. So I think only a small percentage of company are on that frontier stage. Most companies are still on the second and third stage, where you have language and currency and dates and so on, and then a bit of here and there to do that. I saw a lot.
How many stages do you have in your process?
I see that as 4 and potentially 5 with AI coming in the future. So that is even more. So first one is one size fit all. We're already gone. I think this one, the first stage, no one is doing that anymore, because you can't survive at all, And then the second stage is languages and sometimes date. And see, I think very small percentage of companies still doing that because that is all they know, because they think that is the most basic, and that is fine. That's most basic. That can get you to somewhere. And then the third layers, which a lot more companies, I think the most percentage, if you can see the bell curve, is on this third stage where they think more about like more things that they can do about social media, about small details that they can tweak within the products, right? Small things that they know of, but most of the cultural insights they know of are more commonly known. Not the one that you have to dig deeper, find out, actually observe in a deeper level as well. And then the fourth layers and where kind of overlap with the third layer is where most companies start to look into that. Like I say, it's more bigger company have the capacity to do that as well. And then the fifth one is yet to come. I think AI and all those things is going to show us certain elements, how we do that. And also I think the world might be even more integrated with the technology coming out. For example, I got questions about, do you see how Gen Z is doing from culture to culture and everything? And what I observed so far as well is that sure, they still have a different culture with Gen Z, how they behave and so on in certain elements, certain aspects, but they become more and more similar in certain way of their behavior because of how technology embedded in their lives so much, the commonly used technology. So it will be interesting to see how culture is not going to go away, but how much is going to be overlap and changing, and hence how much local adaptations is needed in the future, or in what way it's going to be manifested in the future. So that one is the fifth stage.
And how do you see AI changing the way we approach cultural intelligence? Also, especially because LLMs also get cultural bias from where they have been developing, and we have all this discussion with DeepSeek and versus all the American AIs here in Europe. At least until now, I mean, we do have some LLMs, but they didn't get much traction. What's the next frontier in your opinion?
So, yes, the question, like you talk about the LLMs that we're having now. I actually did some experiments with a friend about like how much cultural insights that they gave us if we want to launch a market. So we pretend we're actually a company wanted to launch in Saudi Arabia and China.
Right.
And we actually compare ChatGPT with Jais, which is Arabic, and Ernie, which is Chinese one. So we compare the output and how much accuracy in terms of cultural insights, because I know these markets very well. So I can assess them and how details they can give us. So like hallucinations, maybe slightly, but not as much when it comes to culturalizations. But then biases or high level, it's definitely, that stereotyping content they give you. You certainly see that regardless of which locals or more international and so on. So we certainly see that there's a gap in cultural knowledge that can be given. Having said that, since then, that was last year, and since then this year I have been actually implementing and using it more in terms of trying to find if we know what kind of cultural aspects we want to look into, and we can kind of prompt better and then come in with a different view, can LLMs actually provide even better or more accurate or more in-depth cultural elements? And the answer is yes, but but it's not everything. So I actually compare before going into a research in Colombia, for example. I actually use that and use my own toolkit, which I'm going to use that on my workshop in Productized as well, to kind of look into the cultural aspects that I have identified can be used for across market and across domain, and use that to kind of create insights and cultural elements and everything, and create some hypotheses as well to bring into the research to see how accurate and how details. And then I compare with my ones. It's actually most of the hypotheses I put in is actually quite accurate, apart from 2 or 3. So the percentage is quite low in terms of the one that is actually not accurate or completely the wrong ones. So yeah, I think there's a potentials of doing that in using LLMs or ChatGPT and similar kind. as long as you know what input to put in, what kind of things you look into, how you dig the informations out, but also still need to use it carefully. You use it as a framework to kind of help you to frame your thinking or to frame your assumptions or so on.
Absolutely, absolutely. The basics remain valid. So, if someone's just starting to think about culture in their product strategy, where should they begin? And of course, we don't want to give the whole thing. I know you have a workshop for Productized prepared, but can you give us just some technical advice, some go-to pointers?
I got this question a lot for years and years every time I speak in conferences. Like, where do I get the information about a culture or information? And unfortunately, there's no one sources that tell you everything about a country, even, a culture.
Sure.
Because even like, for example, even I went to Japan once, but for two different clients. One is Spotify and one for Asana. I don't know, you know Asana.
Yes, absolutely. We use Asana to
Okay.
productize ourselves.
So I actually on the same trip we were looking at into the local culture for the products. Even the same countries, it should be the same culture, right? Like
Right.
the thing. But the thing we look into are so different. One is work management tool, which is business related. So the culture aspect that you look into are completely different from Spotify, a media company, entertainment company. So in that instance, that's the example I talk to people. Like that's why there's no one sources that will tell you everything about the markets and you should do this, you should do that. I think if you want to learn about the basic of certain culture, there's a book called this is I think the cultural map.
Culture map. Yeah, I have that one.
But then the difference between what Erin Meyers have and what we look into is Erin Meyers dimensions are more for very, very focused on communications, right? So that's why she can distill it into 8 dimensions because that is what people talk about when they talk about communications on. When it comes to businesses, which is what the advice that I'm giving to companies is more about business, right? It could touch on all aspects of businesses and so on. So it's harder to kind of say it's only 8 dimensions. This is which country plot onto what within this scale and so on. But it's a good way for people to start thinking about how different culture maybe behave slightly differently, awareness, because one thing about learning about culture is you need to trigger something in your brain to be more aware, to be more curious, to be more wanting to observe. Like if you go on holiday, if you just go on holiday, you just say, oh, it's nice and it's a holiday. But once something trigger in your mind and the curiosity come into your mind and you start to see things differently, you will sit there and say, that waitress or waiters do this and that. It's interesting. You start to get more observant. And that is helpful even though you are in a leisure context. So I think anything you can get to yourself, start to think about it slightly differently, have conversation with friends. If you have friends from different cultures, talk about them, because that will be a good starting point to help your brain rewired slightly different way.
So if you could put it this way, what's a mindset shift you wish every product leader would adopt tomorrow? What would that be?
One fundamental one, I think, is not, I want to say be curious, but that is quite a standard question, quite standard thing to say, to be curious, because you need to be curious and open-minded, right? I think that is a big mindset in, not even just with culture, but as a product, in the product industry, we always have to be curious and be open-minded. But I think the other mindset is that what works in what market, how people behave and be different. I think it's be acceptable that what you're familiar with, what you think you know, might not be the same as what other people are familiar with. And what you think could work in one country, based on what your assumptions have, might not be exactly as what you see and observe or hear in another country. So you need to dig deeper and understand more and ask more curious questions on that.
Okay, so that's deep. That's deep because you have to be very open as an individual to allow for that to happen, right? You have to postulate that your hypothesis might be actually wrong, and you have to be open to embrace nuance. So look, I think that's a wrap for today's episode for the Productized Podcast. We've covered a lot of grounds, and this is obviously super complex, probably the most complex topics you can actually have a conversation on. A big thank you to Chui Tan for your sharing your valuable insights and on creating this change in product. But before you go, do you have any upcoming projects or initiatives you'd like to share? I know that you'll be a speaker here for another conference in June. Obviously, we know we're very happy to have you as a speaker at Productized Conference in October in Lisbon. How can listeners reach out to you and keep the conversation going?
I'm active in LinkedIn. So feel free to follow me or DM me or connect me, mentioning that. Actually, it would be good to mention that I heard your conversations with André on Productized, so I know where the context coming in as well. So feel free to connect me on that. So LinkedIn is one of them. And then YouTube channels that I have, that I start curating a lot of shorts, a lot of tips and examples that I saw on different projects I see and different case studies I see as well, and tips that I'm giving to companies when they're launching and thinking about culturalizations as well. So that is the two main channels. And then, of course, my website, Beyō.global, Beyō.global. And then on there, you can find my books, links, and other articles and type of projects that I work on and the insights and so on.
Amazing. So for everyone tuning in, don't forget to follow Productize on LinkedIn and subscribe to the podcast and leave us a comment with your thoughts on today's episode. We'd love to hear more from you and get to understand where you're from as well. Thanks again for listening. Remember, change is something we can all create together. See you in the next episode, if not at the conference. Thank you.